The oppressive summer sun beat down on the Aqua Doom water park, baking the plastic slides until they shimmered like mirages. A group of teenagers, high on the thrill of a day off school, scrambled to the top of the aptly named Vortex, a monstrous tube of twisting, turning, dark fiberglass. "Who's first?" Jake shouted, his voice cracking with preteen excitement. Lewis, ever the daredevil, didn't even wait for an answer. With a whoop, he launched himself into the inky blackness. The others cheered, their laughter echoing off the damp, enclosed space. A moment later, a blood-curdling scream ripped through the air, quickly swallowed by the roaring rush of water. "Wow, Lewis is really getting into it," Emma giggled, mistaking the shriek for pure exhilaration. "My turn!" She cannonballed into the darkness, followed closely by Chloe, then Sam, each one eager to experience the fun Louis was clearly having. But Louis wasn't having fun. Not anymore. As he hurtled down the vortex, the initial rush gave way to a chilling realization. The darkness wasn't just the inside of a slide, it was a blind descent, and the roaring water was punctuated by a sickening scraping sound. He felt the sharp, burning pain rip across his side, then his leg, as if he'd been dragged over a cheese grater. He tried to scream again, but the water filled his mouth, choking him. The current twisted him, spun him, and for a terrifying second, he was facing backward, looking up the slide. That's when he saw it. In the faint, almost non-existent light filtering from the entrance, he saw a jagged, gaping crack in the fiberglass, running like a lightning bolt across the inner surface of the slide. The edges were razor sharp, glinting wickedly even in the dimness. As he watched, horrified, he saw what looked like streaks of dark red smeared along the fractured plastic. The screams he'd heard were his own, of course, but the others had mistaken them for joy. He hit the splash pool with a violent force, gasping for air, scrambling out, his eyes wide with a terror that no summer day should ever hold. The lifeguard, idly flipping through a magazine, barely registered his emergence. Louis spun around, yelling, "Don't go! Don't go! There's a crack in the slide!" But it was too late. Emma had already emerged, her face pale, her swimsuit torn in several places, and a crimson stain rapidly blooming on her thigh. She didn't scream, she didn't cry. She just stared blankly at Louis, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor running through her. And then, from the depths of the splash pool, Chloe surfaced, her head lolling unnaturally, her bright yellow swimsuit shredded, revealing horrifying gashes. Sam shot out next, his body unnaturally still, the water around him immediately clouding with red. The sun still shone, the music still blared, but a chill had descended upon the Aqua Doom, a chill that had nothing to do with the cool water. The screams of joy had been a lie, and the true horror of the neglected maintenance had just surfaced. The lifeguard finally looked up, alerted by the sudden quiet. He saw Louis, soaking wet and shaking, pointing a trembling finger back at the slide's exit. He saw Emma, bleeding and in shock. And then he saw Chloe and Sam, undeniably lifeless, floating in the shallow splash pool. The bright, cheerful atmosphere of the water park curdled, revealing the horrific consequences of ignored safety warnings and worn-out equipment. The Aqua Doom was not just a water park, it was a death trap. And the Vortex, with its hidden, razor-sharp maw, had claimed its first victims. Part 2. The cover-up begins. The lifeguard, a young man named Gary, felt a cold dread creep through him, replacing his usual summer boredom. The scene before him was a nightmare. Lewis's frantic shouts, Emma's bleeding leg, and the sickening stillness of Chloe and Sam in the water. His eyes darted to the mouth of the vortex, where he could just make out the glint of the fractured fiberglass. This wasn't a minor accident. This was a catastrophe. His first instinct was to call 911, but before he could even reach for his radio, A shrill whistle cut through the air. Mr. Hernandez, the park manager, a portly man with a perpetually furrowed brow, was striding towards them, his face a mask of controlled fury. He took in the scene with a single, sweeping glance, his eyes lingering on the bodies in the pool for only a second too long. What in God's name is going on here? Hernandez's voice was low but laced with menace. He didn't wait for an answer. Gary, get those children out of the water. Immediately. And you, he pointed at Lewis, his finger trembling slightly, control yourself. There's no need for hysterics. Gary, still reeling, moved on autopilot, wading into the pool. The water, now murky with blood, swirled around his knees. He gently lifted Chloe, her body disturbingly light, her limbs chillingly limp. As he carried her towards the side, Hernandez was already barking orders into his phone, his back to the scene. Security to the Vortex, code red, and get the medical team quietly. Within minutes, two burly security guards in crisp white shirts were at the scene, their faces grim. They moved with practiced efficiency, erecting temporary barriers around the splash pool, subtly blocking the view of curious park-goers. One guard spoke in hushed tones to Emma, guiding her away from the edge, while the other began ushering bewildered families further down the path. Hernandez was a whirlwind of hushed commands. No one leaves this area until we've assessed the situation. This is a temporary closure for maintenance. We apologize for the inconvenience. The words were designed to sound reassuring, but they hung in the humid air like a shroud. He then turned his full attention to Lewis, who was still trying to explain what he saw. Mr. Hernandez, there's a huge crack in the slide. It's like razor blades in there, Louis pleaded, gesturing wildly towards the vortex. Hernandez's eyes narrowed. He placed a firm, almost crushing hand on Louis's shoulder. Son, I understand you're upset, but you're clearly disoriented. There are no cracks in our slides. This was an unfortunate incident, a medical emergency. Do you understand? His voice was low, persuasive, and utterly chilling. Louis felt the knot of fear tighten in his stomach. He looked at Gary, who avoided his gaze, then at the impassive faces of the security guards. He realized, with a sickening certainty, that no one was going to believe him. The Aqua Doom wasn't just covering up an accident. They were erasing it. The screams of joy had been a lie, and the deadly truth was now being buried under a mountain of corporate lies. Part 3. The Unfolding Cover-Up. The next few hours at Aqua Doom were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Mr. Hernandez, a man clearly experienced in crisis management, orchestrated a chillingly efficient operation. The temporary maintenance closure of the Vortex was announced over the loudspeakers, a chipper, pre-recorded message belying the grim reality at the top of the slide. Security guards, now joined by plainclothes staff members, subtly but firmly redirected anyone who lingered near the splash pool. Families, sensing a shift in the park's vibrant energy, began to pack up, grumbling about wasted tickets but ultimately eager to escape the suddenly oppressive atmosphere. Louis, still soaked and shivering with shock, found himself ushered into a small, windowless office by two silent security guards. Hernandez entered moments later, his face now a mask of practiced concern. Louis, we're very sorry for the distress you've experienced, he began, his voice smooth as silk. We understand this was a frightening incident. We've arranged for your parents to be contacted and will ensure you get home safely. Before Louis could protest or reiterate his claims about the crack, a park medic, looking distinctly uncomfortable, entered with a small bag. Just a mild sedative to help you calm down, son, Hernandez explained, though it felt more like a command. Louis resisted, but the medic was surprisingly strong, and soon a dull haze began to settle over his frantic thoughts. He vaguely heard Hernandez explaining away his earlier shouts as post-traumatic stress and hallucinations due to shock. Meanwhile, outside, the true horror was being meticulously erased. Chloe and Sam's bodies, wrapped in dark tarpaulins, were discreetly loaded into a plain white van, not an ambulance. Hernandez made a quick, hushed call, presumably to the local coroner or a sympathetic contact, arranging for the deaths to be classified as drowning accidents during a spontaneous seizure event. Emma, still dazed and bleeding, was taken to the park's first aid station, where her lacerations were cleaned and bandaged with alarming speed. A park employee, posing as a sympathetic counselor, gently but firmly guided her through a fabricated story about slipping on the wet surface near the splash pool and hitting her head, causing the injuries. The park's maintenance crew, under intense supervision from Hernandez himself, descended on the Vortex. Special chemicals were sprayed into the slide, not to clean, but to obscure any remaining bloodstains. The jagged crack, the silent witness to the tragedy, was quickly repaired with a fiberglass patching kit. The work was crude, but effective enough to withstand a cursory glance. By the time the last of the families had left, and the sun began to dip below the horizon, the Aqua Doom appeared, to the untrained eye, to be just another water park after a busy day. The only lingering signs were the faint smell of chemicals and the unnatural quiet around the Vortex, now cordoned off with a permanent-looking, closed for seasonal maintenance sign. The official story, meticulously crafted and rehearsed, was ready for any inquiries. 2 unfortunate drownings, a minor injury due to a fall, and a distressed teenager's overactive imagination. The Aqua Doom's reputation, and more importantly, its financial stability, would remain unblemished. The only price, it seemed, was the truth and the lives of 2 teenagers.